Why do some people stand firm when the world around them seems to fall apart, while others lose their footing at the first sign of trouble? It's a question that's echoed through centuries, from ancient battlefields to modern boardrooms, from personal crises to global upheavals. The answer lies not in luck or circumstance, but in something far deeper: the silent science of inner fortitude, a principle the Stoics mastered over 2,000 years ago. Think about the last time life threw you a curveball. Did you react with clarity, or did chaos cloud your judgment? The difference between those two responses isn't just about personality, it's about understanding how the mind can be trained to remain unshaken, no matter what storms rage outside. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Those words weren't just poetic, they were practical. In a world where uncertainty is the only certainty, the Stoics didn't just survive, they thrived. They didn't avoid hardship, they expected it, and in that expectation, they found a kind of resilience that borders on the superhuman. But here's the thing: this isn't some outdated philosophy locked away in history books. The same principles that kept Aurelius steady as he led an empire through war and plague are the very tools you can use today to navigate the chaos of modern life. This video isn't just about ancient wisdom, it's about unlocking the secrets of minds that never snap. We'll explore how Stoic practices transform fear into focus, how they turn obstacles into opportunities, and most importantly, how you can cultivate that same unbreakable calm in your own life. Because inner fortitude isn't a gift reserved for a select few, it's a skill honed through deliberate practice. And by the time we're done, you'll understand not just the why behind unshakable people, but the how, the actionable steps that separate those who bend from those who stand tall. So if you've ever wondered how to face life's challenges without crumbling, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Imagine holding a glass of water in your hand. The water inside represents everything in life, some of it clear and still, some swirling with turbulence. Now imagine trying to grip that glass so tightly that not a single drop spills. Your fingers ache, your hand shakes, and yet the water keeps moving. That's the illusion of control so many of us chase. But here's what Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher born a slave, understood better than most: the glass isn't yours to hold. The water isn't yours to command. The only thing you truly possess, your grip, your choice to hold on lightly or squeeze until you break. He put it plainly: some things are in our control while others are not. This is the dichotomy of control, the cornerstone of Stoic resilience. It's the practice of sorting life into two simple categories: what's yours to influence and what's not. Your opinions, your actions, your values, those belong to you. The weather, the past, other people's choices, those lie beyond your reach. The moment you internalize this split, something extraordinary happens. The weight of the world lifts. Stress doesn't vanish, but it transforms. You stop exhausting yourself trying to bend reality to your will and start focusing your energy where it actually matters. Take a surgeon in the operating room. They can't control a patient's unexpected reaction to anesthesia or a sudden equipment failure, but they can control their preparation, their steady hands, their ability to adapt in the moment. The best surgeons aren't those who rage against the unpredictable. They're the ones who train relentlessly for what they can master and meet the rest with calm precision. That's the dichotomy of control in action, directing effort where it counts and releasing what can't be changed. Now think about your own life. How often do you waste mental energy wrestling with traffic jams, other people's opinions, or outcomes that were never yours to decide? Epictetus would call this misplaced effort, like shouting at the rain for being wet. The Stoic alternative isn't passivity, it's strategic focus. It's asking yourself before any challenge, is this mine to solve? If the answer is no, you conserve your strength. If it's yes, you act with clarity and conviction. This isn't just philosophy, it's the ultimate productivity hack, the secret to emotional endurance, the reason some people navigate chaos while others drown in it. So here's an invitation. For the next 24 hours, notice where your grip is too tight. The email you obsess over that hasn't been answered, the argument you replay in your head, the future you try to micromanage. Then ask the Stoic question, is this mine to hold? Every time you let go of what isn't yours, you're not giving up. You're making room for the strength that actually belongs to you. There's a radical idea at the heart of Stoicism that flips suffering on its head. What if the very things we resist are the ones that shape us into who we're meant to become? Seneca, the philosopher who faced exile, chronic illness, and eventual execution by his own student, put it this way: the wise man will turn every obstacle into fuel. That's amor fati, the love of fate. It's not about gritting your teeth through hardship or passively resigning yourself to circumstance. It's about embracing life's twists with the same intensity most people reserve only for their victories. Consider the story of Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism. His life changed forever when a shipwreck destroyed his merchant fortune, leaving him stranded in Athens with nothing. Instead of despairing, he wandered into a bookstore, discovered philosophy, and built an entire school of thought that would endure for millennia. What looked like catastrophe became the pivot point of his legacy. Zeno didn't just survive his misfortune, he used it as kindling. That's the power of amor fati. When you stop fighting reality and start working with it, even the heaviest boulders in your path become stepping stones. This mindset isn't mystical, it's intensely practical. Think of a blacksmith tempering steel. The metal doesn't become stronger despite the hammer blows, it becomes stronger because of them. Our minds work the same way. Every time you meet adversity with acceptance instead of resistance, you're not just enduring the blow, you're forging resilience. Seneca knew this when he wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." The obstacles you curse today could be the very things preparing you for tomorrow's triumphs if you let them. Now reflect on your own life. Recall a recent setback, a missed opportunity, a harsh criticism, a plan that unraveled. How much energy did you spend wishing it hadn't happened? What if instead you'd asked, how could this serve me? Maybe that rejection freed you for a better path. Maybe that failure taught you a lesson success never could. Amor fati isn't about denying pain. It's about refusing to let pain go to waste. The Stoics didn't see fate as something to defeat, but as a partner in their growth, a relentless teacher whose lessons might hurt in the moment but build unshakable strength over time. Here's the invitation. Next time life hands you something you didn't ask for, pause before you push back. Ask yourself not, why is this happening to me? But what can this make of me? That shift from resistance to curiosity is where ordinary endurance transforms into extraordinary resilience, because the secret isn't avoiding the storm, it's learning to dance in the rain. What if the key to facing life's toughest moments wasn't just courage but preparation? The Stoics practiced something called Premeditatio Malorum, Latin for the premeditation of evils. It sounds dark at first glance, but this ancient technique is actually one of the most empowering mental tools you can wield. Marcus Aurelius captured its essence when he wrote, "Begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." Far from pessimism, this was his way of vaccinating his mind against disappointment. Think of how elite athletes train. Before a big match, a boxer doesn't just visualize victory, they rehearse getting knocked down. A gymnast mentally practices recovering from a missed grip. This isn't self-doubt, it's strategic readiness. By imagining worst-case scenarios in vivid detail, they strip those moments of their power to shock or derail them. The Stoics were doing the same thing 2,000 years earlier, recognizing that fear often comes from the unknown. When you've already walked through potential disasters in your mind, they lose their ability to paralyze you in reality. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies on stress inoculation show that people who mentally rehearse challenges from public speaking to medical procedures experience less anxiety and perform better when the moment arrives. It's why firefighters drill endlessly, why pilots train in flight simulators, and why you might run through a difficult conversation in your head before having it. Premeditatio Malorum isn't about expecting the worst to happen. It's about being ready if it does. Here's how to put this into practice today. Pick an upcoming event that's making you anxious, a job interview, a difficult conversation, a high-stakes presentation. Now close your eyes and imagine everything that could go wrong. The technology fails, you forget your lines, someone interrupts you with tough questions. Sit with that discomfort until it feels familiar. Then visualize yourself responding with calm, adjusting, adapting, finding solutions. When you open your eyes, you'll carry a quiet confidence. Whatever happens, you've already faced it in your mind. This practice reveals a profound truth. Resilience isn't the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. The Stoics weren't preparing for suffering, they were preparing for freedom. Freedom from panic, from paralysis, from the tyranny of unmet expectations. Because when you've stood eye to eye with your fears in advance, real life becomes something far more manageable. Just another day in the arena. Picture this, you're standing on a mountaintop at night, looking up at a sky so vast it makes your chest ache. Stars stretch endlessly, some so distant their light left them before human civilization began. That tiny blue dot in the cosmic ocean, that's Earth, and somewhere on that speck is the problem keeping you awake tonight. This is the view from above. A Stoic exercise Marcus Aurelius used to shrink life's anxieties down to size. He wrote in his Meditations, "Think of the substance of the whole universe, how little of it is yours. Think of the expanse of time, how infinitely tiny your share." What sounds like nihilism is actually liberation. When you zoom out far enough, most of what weighs us down isn't just small, it's temporary, fleeting, almost insignificant against the grand canvas of existence. Astronauts call this shift the overview effect. When they see Earth from space, no borders, no conflicts, just a fragile marble swirling in darkness, their priorities reorganize instantly. Petty grievances vanish, political divisions seem absurd. What's left is clarity. We're all sharing this tiny life raft in the cosmos. The Stoics achieved the same perspective without leaving the ground. By mentally climbing to that cosmic vantage point, they could distinguish between what truly mattered and what merely felt urgent in the heat of the moment. Here's how to try it right now. Take that frustration gnawing at you, the rude comment, the missed deadline, the unfair criticism. Now imagine viewing it from 10,000 years in the future. Will anyone remember it? Will it have altered the course of your life in any meaningful way? Chances are it'll fade like footprints in sand. That's not to say your feelings aren't valid. It's about recognizing their true weight. The colleague who slighted you, the mistake that embarrassed you, these aren't catastrophes. They're dust motes in a sunbeam when seen from the perspective of geologic time. This practice isn't about dismissing your struggles, it's about holding them in proper proportion. Ancient Stoics used it to face mortality with courage. Modern psychologists use similar techniques to treat anxiety. The principle is the same. What overwhelms us up close often becomes manageable, even laughable when we step back. So the next time a problem feels insurmountable, do what Aurelius did. Lift your gaze, remember you're a brief spark in an endless night sky, and ask yourself, in the grand scheme, does this deserve the energy I'm giving it? The answer might just set you free. There's a practice so counterintuitive it feels like holding a mirror to the sun, staring directly at the one thing we spend our lives trying to ignore. The Stoics called it Memento Mori, remember you must die. Far from morbid fixation, this was their secret to living with unparalleled clarity. Seneca put it bluntly, you act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. We tiptoe around death as if silence makes it vanish, while the Stoics leaned in until its icy breath sharpened their vision. They understood what modern psychology now confirms. Confronting mortality doesn't paralyze, it prioritizes. Consider how differently we approach time when faced with its limits. A study of terminal patients found most experienced a striking shift. Petty grievances melted away, while simple joys, sunlight through leaves, a child's laughter, an unplanned afternoon with someone they loved suddenly glowed with urgency. This isn't tragedy, it's revelation. The Stoics sought that clarity before crisis struck. By keeping death at the forefront of their minds, they filtered out life's noise. Every argument, every opportunity, every decision passed through a single question. Does this matter in the shadow of the end? Imagine applying that lens today. The meeting you're dreading, the grudge you're nursing, the dream you've postponed until things calm down. How would they change if this year were your last? Not in some distant, abstract future, but now. The founder of palliative care, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, observed that people rarely wish they'd worked more or acquired more. Their regrets cluster around authenticity. I wish I'd had the courage to live true to myself. The Stoics weaponized this insight. Memento Mori wasn't about fear, it was about liberation. Death's certainty became the whetstone that honed their choices to a razor's edge. Here's the paradox: by embracing life's finitude, the Stoics expanded its depth. A musician who performs like it's their last concert pours soul into every note. A teacher who lectures like it's their final class speaks with unguarded passion. This practice strips away the illusion of someday and leaves only the raw, potent now. Seneca urged his students to live each day as if it were completing their life, not with reckless abandon, but with deliberate intention. So try this. Tonight, as you turn off the lights, ask yourself, if today had been my last, would I be content with how I spent it? Not perfect, not grand, just true. The answers might unsettle you, but in that discomfort lies an invitation to stop waiting for a wake-up call that's already ringing. Here's something remarkable about the human mind. It can take a single piece of information and within milliseconds spin it into a story that either lifts us to hope or drags us into despair. The Stoics recognized this power and developed a practice called the Discipline of Assent, the art of pausing between what happens and how we interpret it. Epictetus put it plainly, men are disturbed not by things but by the views which they take of them. That pause, that sliver of space between event and reaction, is where resilience is born or broken. Think of your mind as a courtroom. Every impression a critical comment, a missed call, a change in plan stands trial before it becomes your truth. Most of us skip the deliberation and go straight to sentencing. The Stoics insisted on due process. When bad news arrives, instead of letting it flood your system like a toxin, you learn to examine it first. Is this fact or interpretation? Is this event truly catastrophic, or has your mind dressed it in catastrophe's clothing? Modern cognitive behavioral therapy echoes this exact principle. Our emotions follow our judgments, not the events themselves. Take a simple example. Your boss sends an email with the subject line, "We need to talk." Instantly, your heart races. You imagine layoffs, reprimands, failure. But here's what the Discipline of Assent asks. What do you actually know? Only that a conversation is requested. The rest is fiction you've authored. The Stoic response isn't to suppress concern, it's to refuse to crown assumptions as kings. By withholding immediate assent, you create room to respond rather than react. This practice transforms everyday moments. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Your first thought might label them reckless or rude, but what if they're racing to a hospital? What if they simply didn't see you? The event hasn't changed, only the story you attach to it. Epictetus trained his students to add one crucial phrase to every upsetting impression. "This is how it appears to me." That slight distance disarms the mind's tendency to confuse perception with reality. Here's your challenge. Tomorrow, become an anthropologist of your own thoughts. Notice the automatic narratives that arise, the coworker's tone that proves they dislike you, the quiet evening that means you're falling behind. Catch yourself in the act of granting assent to these impressions. Then ask, is this fact or is this the spin my mind has created? That split-second interrogation won't erase life's difficulties, but it will hand you back the reins. Because between stimulus and response, in that sacred pause, lies the freedom to choose who you'll be when the world pushes. There's a breath between what happens to you and how you respond, a sliver of time so thin most people miss it entirely. The Stoics called this space the proherses, the power of choice no external force can take from you. Epictetus put it bluntly, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient insight. The brain's prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational decision-making, needs just seconds to override the amygdala's primal reactions. Those seconds are where resilience is forged. Consider how Navy SEAL operate under gunfire. Their training doesn't eliminate fear, it weaponizes pause. They practice tactical breathing, inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, to hijack the body's stress response. By inserting deliberate rhythm into chaos, they create room for clarity. A SEAL doesn't stop bullets from flying, but in that pause, they choose whether to advance, retreat, or communicate. That's Stoicism in action. Not control over circumstances, but mastery over the gap where decisions lie. This discipline mirrors mindfulness practices now backed by clinical research. A study at Harvard found that just 8 weeks of mindfulness training thickened the prefrontal cortex while shrinking the amygdala, literal proof that pausing reshapes the brain. The mechanism is simple but profound. When you observe your reactions instead of becoming them, you step outside the chain reaction of emotion. A frustration arises, and instead of lashing out, you notice the heat in your chest, the tightening of your jaw. That noticing is the pause. That pause is freedom. Try this today. Next time your phone pings with an irritating message, or someone cuts in line at the grocery store, resist the immediate surge of reaction. Count silently to 5, 1001, 1002, and feel the shift. Those 5 seconds are your proherses, your inviolable power. In them, you might discover that the insult loses its sting, the inconvenience its weight. You're no longer a puppet jerked by life's strings, but a puppeteer choosing which threads to pull. Epictetus warned, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That reaction isn't automatic, it's a choice carved out in the pause. Master that space and you master yourself. We live in a world where discomfort is treated like a system error, something to be fixed immediately. Thermostats maintain perfect temperatures, apps deliver food with a tap, and algorithms feed us content designed to keep scrolling frictionless. But the Stoics recognized a dangerous truth. When we eliminate all resistance from our lives, we atrophy the very muscles that make us resilient. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, put it bluntly: how can someone who has never endured hardship be strong? His answer was radical for any era: voluntary discomfort. Like an athlete training for the Olympics, he insisted we must practice hunger, practice thirst, practice cold, not because suffering is virtuous, but because comfort is a cage. Consider how modern life insulates us from even minor challenges. We complain when Wi-Fi lags, when coffee isn't hot enough, when a delivery arrives late. First world problems, yes, but they reveal a deeper pattern. Our tolerance for discomfort has shrunk to the point where a dead phone battery feels like a crisis. Contrast this with the Stoic practice of deliberately choosing hardship, wearing thin clothing in winter, sleeping on the floor, skipping meals. These weren't acts of self-punishment, they were stress tests for the soul. By regularly stepping outside their comfort zones, Stoics built an immunity to life's inevitable shocks. The science behind this is startlingly modern. Studies on cold exposure show that brief, controlled stress like cold showers boosts dopamine levels, reduces inflammation, and trains the nervous system to handle stress more effectively. Intermittent fasting triggers cellular repair processes. Even digital detoxes rewire attention spans. The Stoics were pioneers of what we now call hormesis, the principle that small doses of stress make us stronger. They understood something our convenience-driven culture forgets. Resilience isn't inherited, it's earned through repeated exposure. Here's the invitation: start small. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Leave your phone behind for an afternoon walk. Try a cold shower, not for an hour, just for the last 30 seconds of your routine. Each time you choose discomfort voluntarily, you're not just enduring it, you're reprogramming your relationship with it. You're proving to yourself that you can handle more than you think. Musonius Rufus compared this to a wrestler training on sand instead of soft mats. Difficulty shows what men are, so ask yourself, what comfort have you made non-negotiable? The snooze button, endless snacks, constant entertainment. Pick one this week and let it go, not forever, just long enough to remember your own strength. Because the goal isn't to live ascetically, but to break the illusion that comfort equals safety. When you know you can thrive without the crutches, you walk taller even when you use them. That's the Stoic secret. Voluntary discomfort isn't about rejecting life's pleasures, it's about refusing to let them make you fragile. There's a quiet power in watching a storm from behind a window, seeing the wind rage, the rain lash, yet feeling none of it. The Stoics mastered this same detachment with their emotions, not by suppressing them, but by creating space between what happens and how they engage with it. Marcus Aurelius described it as the stillness at the center of a spinning world. He wasn't talking about indifference. He was describing the art of non-reaction, the ability to witness life's turbulence without being swept away by it. Think of a judge presiding over a heated trial. Their role isn't to ignore the drama, it's to observe it without becoming part of it. They hear accusations, outbursts, emotional pleas, yet their job is to distinguish fact from noise. The Stoics practiced this daily, treating their own minds like a courtroom. When an insult landed or a plan unraveled, they didn't rush to respond. They paused, examined the evidence, and only then decided if it deserved their energy. Modern psychology calls this emotional intelligence, the ability to regulate reactions rather than being hijacked by them. Here's where most of us go wrong. We confuse observation with participation. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and instantly we're scripting arguments in our heads. A coworker sends a terse email, and we're drafting resignations by lunch. But what if, like that judge, we simply noted the facts? This car changed lanes abruptly. This message lacked warmth, full stop. No backstory, no motive assigned, no future imagined. The event remains neutral until we drape it in meaning. Try this today. Pick an interaction that irked you, maybe a comment from a relative, a delay in your schedule. Now strip away every layer you've added. What actually happened minus the interpretation? You'll often find the sting comes not from the event itself, but from the story you wrapped around it. The Stoics called this assent, the moment we endorse or reject an impression. Most suffering begins when we assent too quickly, mistaking our knee-jerk reactions for truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting." In other words, the very thing that seems like an offense can become training ground for calm. That's the heart of non-reaction, not avoiding life's friction, but using it to polish your clarity. So next time drama knocks, don't rush to answer. Stand at the window, watch the storm pass, and keep your hands dry. The power was never in the weather. It's in your choice to step back or step in. There's a profound shift that happens when you stop seeing yourself as an isolated speck in the universe and start recognizing the invisible threads that bind you to everything else. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the understanding that all things are interconnected, like notes in a vast cosmic symphony. Hierocles, a lesser-known but brilliant Stoic thinker, captured this idea with his circles of concern analogy. Picture a series of rings radiating outward. At the center, you. The next ring holds your family, then friends, community, humanity, and finally, the entire natural world. His radical proposal: we should constantly work to draw those outer circles inward, to see strangers as neighbors and neighbors as kin. This isn't just poetic idealism, it's psychological armor. When you grasp that your struggles are part of a larger tapestry, loneliness loses its grip. Think of a single thread in a spider's web. Tug it, and the whole structure trembles. The Stoics saw human lives the same way. Your resilience isn't just for you, it ripples outward. Marcus Aurelius wrote of waking each morning and reminding himself, "I am part of a whole." That simple shift from I to we transforms hardship from a solitary burden into a shared experience. Modern science echoes this ancient wisdom. Systems theory shows how forests communicate through fungal networks, how bees thrive through hive intelligence, even how human well-being spikes when we feel embedded in community. Researchers find that people who volunteer during crises often recover from trauma faster, not because their problems vanish, but because helping others rewires their sense of purpose. The Stoics knew this instinctively. Connection isn't just comfort, it's survival. Here's the challenge. Take a problem weighing on you right now. A financial worry, a relationship strain, a professional setback. Now zoom out. How does this fit into the larger human story? Someone, somewhere has faced this before and found a way through. Resources exist beyond your immediate view. Solutions might live in circles you haven't yet pulled close. Sympatheia reminds us that no one is truly alone unless they choose to be. Hierocles urged his students to practice contracting the circles daily, to extend the same compassion to strangers they'd give to family. Try it today. When you pass someone on the street, imagine their fears mirror yours. When you read about distant suffering, let it stir you as if it happened next door. This isn't about carrying the world's weight. It's about realizing you were never meant to. The web holds you too. Imagine holding a snow globe, one of those miniature worlds where every shake sends glitter swirling in a beautiful chaos. Now imagine mistaking that temporary storm for reality. That's what our minds do daily, taking simple events and drowning them in layers of interpretation until we can't see the facts beneath the flurry. The Stoics called this objective representation the discipline of seeing things as they are, not as our fears or hopes paint them. Epictetus put it bluntly, what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about these things. Strip away the judgments and you're left with just the snow, motionless and clear. Modern psychology calls this cognitive diffusion, the act of separating yourself from your thoughts so you can observe them like clouds passing overhead. Think of how a doctor diagnoses an illness. They don't panic at a fever, they measure it. They don't assume the worst from a cough, they test it. The Stoics applied that same clinical detachment to life's challenges. A layoff isn't inherently tragic or liberating, it's simply a change in employment status. The suffering comes when we layer it with stories. I'll never recover. This proves I'm inadequate. My family will think less of me. Those narratives are optional. Here's the practice. Take any current worry, maybe it's a strained friendship or a looming deadline. Now write down only the indisputable facts. She hasn't returned my calls in 3 days. The project is due Friday, full stop. No mind reading, she's ignoring me. No catastrophizing, I'll get fired. Just the raw data. Like a scientist reviewing lab results, you're not denying the reality. You're refusing to contaminate it with assumptions. Marcus Aurelius did this nightly in his journals, dissecting the day's events with surgical precision to find where his perceptions had distorted reality. Try this reframe next time adversity strikes. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is actually happening?" The first question spirals into victimhood. The second anchors you in clarity. A flooded basement isn't a personal betrayal by the universe, it's water where it shouldn't be and a problem to solve. That shift doesn't erase the difficulty, but it does erase the unnecessary suffering we pile on top. Because here's the secret the Stoics uncovered. Most of our pain isn't in the event itself, it's in the theater our minds build around it. Tear down the set, and you'll find the spotlight was always on you, not as a victim of circumstance, but as the director of your response. So here's your challenge. Pick one story you've been telling yourself, a slight, a failure, a fear, and strip it to its skeleton. What remains when you remove the adjectives, the predictions, the imagined motives? What you'll often find isn't a monster, but a manageable truth, and in that truth, an unexpected kind of freedom. You've probably heard the phrase, "God willing," tacked onto plans, maybe from a grandparent or in an old book. The Stoics had their own version, but with a twist that turns planning from an act of control into an exercise in wisdom. They called it the reserve clause, adding, "fate permitting" to every intention, not as superstition, but as a mental safeguard against disappointment. Seneca put it perfectly. The wise man considers both what he seeks and what the universe may provide. That tiny phrase wasn't resignation, it was liberation. By holding plans loosely, they could adapt without breaking. Think of it like building a sandcastle near the tide. You pour your energy into sculpting towers and moats, knowing full well the waves might erase your work. The joy isn't in permanence, it's in the creating, and in the resilience to rebuild when needed. Modern agile methodologies echo this ancient insight. Tech teams don't design rigid 5-year roadmaps, they work in sprints, expecting change. Startups pivot when data contradicts assumptions. The reserve clause is Stoic agility, committing fully to action while detaching from fixed outcomes. Here's why this matters for anyone navigating uncertainty, especially entrepreneurs. A founder might pour everything into a product launch, only to watch a market shift or a competitor's innovation render it obsolete overnight. Without the reserve clause, that's devastation. With it, just another pivot point. The plan wasn't wrong, reality simply had other ideas. This mindset transforms setbacks from personal failures into feedback loops. As Seneca wrote, fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. The reserve clause keeps you in the first category, nimble, alert, and unbroken by life's curveballs. Try this today, the next time you jot down a goal, whether it's finishing a project by Friday or booking a vacation next summer. Add those two silent words, fate permitting. Not as doubt, but as a reminder that your peace isn't mortgaged to the outcome. You'll start noticing something profound. The more you acknowledge life's unpredictability, the less it rattles you. Because the goal was never to control every wave, just to learn to swim in any tide. Modern culture screams that happiness is something to chase, a destination marked by achievements, possessions, and social media validation. But the Stoics whispered a different truth. Joy isn't found, it's cultivated. Epictetus cut to the heart of it. If you wish to be happy, do not seek praise from others, but seek virtue within yourself. That's the radical shift. While today's world ties happiness to external rewards, Stoic tranquility is an inside job, a steady flame that doesn't flicker when the winds of circumstance change. Consider the serenity of monks in a mountain monastery. Their lives are stripped of luxuries, no smartphones, no stock portfolios, no follower counts. Yet studies show many report higher levels of contentment than the average person juggling material comforts. Why? Because their joy springs from something unshakable: presence, purpose, and the mastery of their own minds. The Stoics weren't advocating austerity for its own sake. They were revealing a paradox: the less you depend on external conditions for happiness, the more freely it flows. This isn't about rejecting pleasure, it's about redefining where we anchor our sense of fulfillment. Imagine two people at a party. One scans the room, counting how many glances they attract, their mood rising and falling with each interaction. The other engages deeply, unconcerned with impressions, savoring conversations for their own sake. The first is at the mercy of the crowd, the second carries their joy with them. That's Stoic tranquility, not the absence of delight, but the absence of desperation for it. So what does true contentment look like for you? Is it a bank statement, a title, a curated online persona? Or is it something quieter? The ability to sit with yourself in silence and feel no hunger for more. The Stoics would argue that until your peace isn't borrowed from the world, it isn't really yours. Their joy wasn't in acquiring things, but in shedding the need for them. And in that space where nothing is lacking because nothing is demanded, you'll find a happiness no circumstance can take away. Marcus Aurelius wrote of a sanctuary no outside force could penetrate, an inner citadel where the self remains sovereign even as empires crumble. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul, he observed. Picture a medieval fortress, thick walls to repel invaders, a central keep for refuge, guarded gates that decide what enters. Now imagine that structure within you, not made of stone but of practiced thought. This is Stoicism's ultimate defense mechanism, a mental stronghold where external chaos must stop at the drawbridge. Modern therapy calls this psychological boundaries, the ability to separate what's yours to carry from what isn't. Trauma survivors understand it instinctively. Someone who's endured abuse learns to compartmentalize, to create mental rooms where painful memories are stored but don't flood the present. A soldier home from war might use grounding techniques, visualizing an impenetrable shield when triggers arise. These aren't escapes from reality. They're conscious architectures of resilience. The inner citadel isn't about hiding from life. It's about choosing where life gets to touch you. Consider how we handle digital overwhelm today. Notifications barrage us like arrows against a castle wall. The Stoic response: build a gatekeeper. Before you react to that angry email or sensational headline, pause. Ask, does this deserve entry? Would I let a stranger shout this through my front door? Marcus Aurelius faced literal barbarians at Rome's borders, yet his journals reveal less concern about them than about guarding his judgments. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, he warned. Your citadel's strength depends on what you permit to cross its threshold. Here's how to fortify yours. Close your eyes and envision a space no external event can violate, a room where only your values, your rationality, your core self reside. Maybe it's a library where truths are stored, a watchtower with a clear view of facts, or a simple chair where you sit as observer rather than reactor. When stress mounts, retreat there, not to avoid action but to choose it deliberately, because the power of the inner citadel isn't in its walls, it's in the unshakable truth that you alone hold the keys. The Stoics understood something profound about human nature. We become what we repeatedly observe. That's why they didn't just study philosophy, they studied people. Like sculptors chiseling marble, they sought living models of virtue to shape their own character. Seneca put it bluntly: choose someone whose way of life as well as words, and whose very face as mirroring character, have won your approval. Be always pointing them out to yourself, either as your guardian or your model. This wasn't blind hero worship, it was strategic emulation. Ancient Stoics kept mental dossiers of exemplary figures, not just philosophers, but politicians, soldiers, even rivals whose actions demonstrated courage, wisdom, or temperance in moments of crisis. Think of it like building a personal compass. When Cato the Younger chose to stab himself rather than submit to Julius Caesar's tyranny, Stoics didn't see suicide, they saw unbreakable principle. When Zeno lost his fortune in that shipwreck, they didn't see bad luck, they watched a man turn disaster into reinvention. These weren't just stories, they were psychological tools. By memorizing how role models responded under pressure, the Stoics created a mental library of options for their own challenges. Modern psychology confirms this method. Studies on mental rehearsal show that visualizing specific behaviors, especially those modeled by others, primes the brain to replicate them. Today, we call this mentorship, but with a critical difference. Ancient Stoics curated role models across history, while we often limit ourselves to living influencers or immediate circles. Imagine the power of combining both: studying Marcus Aurelius' journals alongside a respected colleague's work ethic, or Epictetus' resilience alongside a friend's ability to stay calm in chaos. The key, as Seneca warned, is discernment. No man can swim ashore for you. Role models aren't crutches, they're lighthouses showing paths you must walk yourself. Here's a practice to bridge ancient wisdom with modern life. Create a virtue board, digital or physical, with 3 columns: historical figures, contemporary mentors, and personal acquaintances. Under each name, list the specific traits you admire, perhaps Mandela's forgiveness, your boss's decisiveness, your grandmother's quiet generosity. When facing a dilemma, ask, what would my board do? Not to copy blindly, but to cross-pollinate ideas. Over time, you'll notice patterns. The qualities you consistently admire become signposts for your own growth. So who would make your shortlist? A Stoic might include someone unexpected, a rival who handles criticism gracefully, a fictional character who embodies integrity, even a child who laughs off skinned knees. Because role models aren't about perfection, they're about possibility. Every time you spot virtue in another, you found another brick for your inner citadel. Life presents us with endless forks in the road, but the Stoics saw just 2 paths at every juncture: either change the situation or change your mind. Epictetus laid it out with typical bluntness. If a problem is fixable, if a situation is such that you can do something about it, then there is no need to worry. If it's not fixable, then there is no help in worrying. This razor-sharp logic cuts through the paralysis of modern overthinking, what psychologists now call solution-focused therapy. The premise is identical. Stop circling the drain of what if and ask instead, what now? Picture yourself stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. Your pulse quickens, your grip tightens on the wheel. The Stoic fork appears. Can you exit and find an alternate route? That's changing the situation. If not, if you're boxed in, can you reframe this delay as protected time to rehearse your presentation or listen to an inspiring podcast? That's changing your mind. Neither option eliminates the traffic, but one preserves your equilibrium while the other steals it. Now apply this to interpersonal friction. A co-worker consistently dismisses your ideas in meetings. Changing the situation might mean requesting a private conversation to address the dynamic or looping in a manager for mediation. Changing your mind could involve recognizing their behavior reflects their insecurities, not your worth, freeing you to contribute without craving their validation. Modern therapy calls this cognitive restructuring. The Stoics called it wisdom. The power lies in the forced choice. Most suffering comes from lingering in the limbo between options, ranting about traffic but not rerouting, resenting the coworker but not addressing it. Epictetus' fork leaves no room for that purgatory. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about redirecting energy. Frustration that can't fuel action becomes fuel for perspective. Here's your challenge. Identify one recurring irritation in your life: a cluttered garage, a flaky friend, a bureaucratic hassle. Apply the Stoic fork. List one concrete action to improve it, however small, and one mental shift to accept it. If you choose action, move. If you choose acceptance, release, but choose. That's the secret, not control over life's variables, but sovereignty over your response. As Epictetus would say, the door is open, walk through it or stop complaining. We live in an age where productivity is measured in notifications cleared and tasks checked off, where being busy is worn like a badge of honor. But the Stoics measured time differently. Seneca cut through the noise with a single piercing observation. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. For the Stoics, a life well lived wasn't about cramming in more activities. It was about ensuring every action aligned with virtue. They'd look at our modern hustle culture with bewilderment, watching us sprint through days while missing the point of running at all. Consider how most of us approach time management today. We slice our days into 15-minute increments, chasing efficiency while sacrificing depth. We answer emails during meals, scroll through news feeds in bathroom stalls, and mistake motion for progress. Meanwhile, some of history's most impactful leaders, from Marcus Aurelius leading an empire to modern CEOs like Bill Gates, ruthlessly guard empty space in their calendars. Gates is famous for taking weeks, disappearing into a secluded cabin twice a year just to read and reflect. That's not eccentricity, it's Stoic wisdom in action. They understand what Seneca knew: life is long if you know how to use it. The difference lies in prioritization. Modern productivity focuses on how much, while Stoic time management asks to what end. A Stoic wouldn't care if you completed 50 tasks in a day if none cultivated wisdom, justice, courage, or temperance. They'd challenge you to audit your busyness like a financial statement, cutting expenditures of time that don't yield returns in character. Imagine applying that filter to your week. How many meetings, social obligations, or mindless routines would fail the test? This isn't about laziness, it's about intentionality. When Warren Buffett was asked about his productivity secret, he didn't recommend an app or hack. He pulled out a blank sheet of paper. Write down your top 25 goals. Now circle the 5 that matter most. The other 20, avoid them at all costs. That's the Stoic approach, recognizing that true productivity means saying no to good things to say yes to essential ones. Every yes to trivia is a no to meaning. So here's the question lurking beneath all this. What would you stop doing if you took Seneca seriously? Not temporarily, but permanently, activities that fill hours without filling your soul. The answer might unsettle you, because when you stop mistaking movement for purpose, you're left staring at an uncomfortable truth. We don't lack time. We lack the courage to spend it on what actually matters. The Stoics offer no shortcuts, just the reminder that your attention is the most sacred currency you own. Spend it where your soul resides. Most of us duck when life throws a rock, but the Stoics stood straighter, almost welcoming the impact. Marcus Aurelius put it in stone: the obstacle is the way. Not around, not despite, but through. Imagine a martial artist who doesn't just block punches but uses the opponent's momentum to throw them. That's the Stoic approach to adversity. Every setback wasn't just endured, it was reverse engineered into training, a betrayal, a chance to practice forgiveness, financial ruin, a masterclass in temperance. Even exile, which crushed ordinary men, became Seneca's laboratory for studying resilience. Modern psychology calls this the growth mindset, but the Stoics weaponized it centuries earlier. They didn't believe challenges revealed character, they believed challenges built it, like a blacksmith's hammer shaping molten steel. Think of Navy SEAL in Hell Week. Those torturous drills aren't just tests, they're designed to forge the unshakable composure SEAL rely on in combat. The Stoics treated daily life the same way. A rude neighbor wasn't an annoyance, it was a pop quiz in patience, a missed promotion, an oral exam on self-worth. They even had a term for it, ascesis, deliberate practice. Here's where it gets radical. Some Stoics didn't just accept trials, they created them. Like a runner adding ankle weights, they'd voluntarily face discomfort, fasting to appreciate hunger, sleeping on hard floors to remember simplicity, even wearing thin cloaks in winter to confront cold's bite. These weren't acts of masochism, they were rehearsals for life's inevitable storms. The goal wasn't to suffer, but to vaccinate the mind against panic when suffering came unbidden. Now apply this lens to your life. That problem gnawing at you, the strained relationship, the work crisis, the health scare. What if it's not a curse, but your current curriculum? Marcus Aurelius faced plague, war, and betrayal, yet wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." His reign wasn't defined by avoiding disasters, but by using them as whetstones to sharpen his virtues. Your turn. Pick one challenge you're facing right now and reframe it as your Stoic exam. Ask, what muscle is this meant to strengthen? If it's a conflict, maybe it's testing your empathy. If it's failure, perhaps it's probing your detachment from outcomes. The key isn't to dismiss the pain, but to mine it for meaning. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew: life doesn't give you tests you're incapable of passing. Every obstacle is perfectly designed to teach you what you need to learn next. The question is, will you show up for class? Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, once pointed to his ears and mouth during a lecture, then asked a simple question: why do you think nature gave us 2 ears and 1 tongue? His answer cut through centuries of human chatter, that we may hear more and speak less. This wasn't just a quip about anatomy, it was a masterclass in the Stoic art of silence. In a world that rewards constant noise, endless podcasts, 24-hour news cycles, the performative outrage of social media, the ability to withhold speech has become a radical act of self-possession. The Stoics didn't see silence as empty space, they saw it as fertile ground where wisdom grows. Consider how modern workplaces operate. Open-plan offices buzz with half-formed thoughts, meetings drown in circular debates, and inboxes pile up with messages that could have been left unsent. Now picture a leader who resists this frenzy. When a heated debate erupts, they don't rush to fill the air with opinions, they let the tension hang, observing who reveals their true colors in the void. When asked a loaded question, they pause just long enough to make others uncomfortable, then respond with surgical precision. This isn't passivity, it's power. History's most formidable negotiators, from Abraham Lincoln to Warren Buffett, share this trait. They speak less than their adversaries, letting silence do the heavy lifting. The contrast with today's noise addiction couldn't be starker. We've turned conversation into a competitive sport, measuring worth by how quickly we respond, how loudly we opine, how many followers hang on our every tweet. But the Stoics measured words like precious currency. Epictetus warned his students, if you pour a handful of water into a barrel, then pull it out, how much will you leave behind? The same happens when you speak without thinking. Every unnecessary word dilutes your impact. Every moment of silence compounds it. Here's the challenge. For one full day, treat speech like a limited resource. Before speaking, ask Zeno's threefold filter. Is this true? Is this necessary? Is this kind? If any answer is no, let the thought dissolve unspoken. Notice how often you interrupt to affirm your presence, how reflexively you fill quiet with chatter. You'll discover something startling. The less you say, the more others lean in. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back the substance or lack thereof in every conversation. The ultimate test: try a Stoic Sabbath, a 24-hour period where you speak only when absolutely required, not as a vow of muteness, but as an exercise in discernment. You'll find that most of what we say isn't communication, it's nervous habit, ego reinforcement, or social lubrication. Strip that away, and what remains is pure signal, words that carry weight because they've earned their place. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in the stillness of his tent at night, the more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. Your voice, when wielded like a Stoic, isn't just heard, it resonates. We spend a third of our lives asleep, yet how many of us truly master this fundamental act of restoration? The Stoics approached sleep with the same deliberate focus they applied to waking hours, not as wasted time, but as sacred preparation. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who lived as simply as he taught, observed, just as we must train the body for activity, we must train it for rest. For sleep is to the mind what oil is to a lamp, it restores without extinguishing. This wasn't poetic metaphor, it was physiological insight centuries ahead of its time. Modern sleep science confirms what Rufus intuited. The quality of our rest directly fuels the clarity of our judgment, the steadiness of our emotions, and even the strength of our immune system. Compare the typical modern bedtime routine, scrolling through blue-lit screens, digesting the day's anxieties, collapsing into exhausted unconsciousness with the Stoic ritual. They prepared for sleep like athletes preparing for competition. Marcus Aurelius wrote his evening reflections by candlelight, reviewing his actions against Stoic principles. Seneca practiced deliberate relaxation, releasing tension from each limb as if unwinding a tightly coiled rope. These weren't just habits, they were acts of reverence for the mind's need to reset. Today's sleep researchers would applaud their methods. Journaling reduces cortisol levels, progressive muscle relaxation triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, and digital detoxes before bed preserve melatonin production. Some of today's most effective leaders have rediscovered these ancient practices. Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey adopted Stoic-inspired sleep hygiene, banning electronics from his bedroom and aligning his schedule with natural circadian rhythms. Amazon's Jeff Bezos prioritizes 8 hours of sleep, calling it his secret weapon for high-stakes decision-making. These aren't outliers, they're modern torchbearers of a truth the Stoics carved in stone. Mastery of wakefulness begins with mastery of rest. The gap between ancient wisdom and modern science narrows when we examine sleep's role in emotional resilience. A Harvard study found that sleep-deprived individuals recall negative memories 40% more often than positive ones, a neurological tilt toward pessimism Epictetus warned against when he said, "Lack of sleep makes the soul weary." The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes hypersensitive without rest, turning minor irritations into catastrophes. Stoic sleep practices weren't about luxury. They were about maintaining the mental clarity to distinguish true obstacles from imagined ones. So here's the challenge. Audit your nightly ritual through Stoic eyes. Is your pre-sleep environment a temple of restoration or a battleground of distractions? Could you trade 15 minutes of late-night scrolling for 5 minutes of reflection? The change needn't be drastic, just intentional. As the Stoics showed, sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin not with grand gestures, but with the quiet decision to turn out the light. Imagine ending each day not with mindless scrolling, but with a conversation with your wiser self. The Stoics perfected this ritual through journaling not as a diary of events, but as a mirror for the soul. Epictetus insisted, examine each day what you have done well and poorly. If you find errors, rebuke yourself. If you find successes, take heart. This wasn't self-help fluff. It was cognitive behavioral therapy centuries before its time. Their journals weren't filled with complaints or wishful thinking. They were training logs for the mind, tracking progress in the only curriculum that mattered, living with virtue. Modern gratitude journaling captures half the picture. While listing blessings cultivates positivity, the Stoics paired it with something bolder, honest self-audits. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations was never meant for publication. It was his private battlefield where he dissected his own reactions, praised small victories, and course-corrected like a sailor adjusting to shifting winds. Picture a surgeon reviewing their operations. What incisions were precise? Where did hands tremble? That's the Stoic approach to today's relentless refinement through reflection. Here's how to bridge ancient wisdom with modern life. Each morning, light a candle or just your phone's notes app and ask 2 questions. What will I do today to align with my highest principles? And what potential obstacles might derail me? Not vague affirmations, but specific intentions like choosing patience during your team's chaotic meeting or integrity when no one's watching. Then each evening, revisit with a forensic lens. Where did I act with courage? When did fear dictate my choices? The goal isn't self-flagellation, it's pattern recognition. For a tangible start, try this 3-day template. Morning, 1 virtue to emphasize today, e.g., resilience, compassion. 2, 1 trigger to anticipate, e.g., traffic, a critical colleague. Evening, 1 victory to celebrate, however small. 2, 1 moment to learn from without judgment. Modern psychology validates this. Studies show that structured reflection boosts emotional regulation more than venting or positive thinking alone. It's why Navy SEAL debrief every mission and CEOs review key decisions not to dwell, but to distill wisdom from experience. Your challenge: 3 days. Not as a test of discipline, but as an experiment in awareness. Notice how day 1 feels clumsy, day 2 sharper, and by day 3, you're catching reactions before they hijack you. That's the Stoic journal's magic. It turns hindsight into foresight. As Seneca wrote, each day acquire something that will fortify you against poverty, against death, indeed against other misfortunes. The ink becomes your armor. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." This cuts to the heart of Stoic wealth, a radical idea that flips modern consumerism on its head. While today's world equates riches with possessions, status symbols, and endless accumulation, the Stoics measured prosperity by an entirely different currency: inner freedom. They drew a clear line between external wealth, money, property, titles, and internal wealth, self-mastery, contentment, and the ability to derive joy from what you already possess. The difference isn't just philosophical, it's neurological. Modern studies show that once basic needs are met, additional income contributes almost nothing to lasting happiness. Yet we keep chasing more, like sailors drinking seawater to quench their thirst. Take two neighbors living in the same upscale apartment building. One spends weekends agonizing over stock portfolios, fretting about keeping up with the latest luxury car models, and lying awake worrying about maintaining their lifestyle. The other, who earns half as much, finds deep satisfaction in mornings spent reading in sunlight, evenings cooking simple meals with loved ones, and the quiet pride of living debt-free. Who's truly wealthy? The Stoics would argue it's not who you think. Seneca observed, "No person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have." That shift from acquisition to liberation is where real abundance begins. This ancient wisdom finds surprising allies in modern minimalism. Figures like Marie Kondo or Joshua Fields Milburn didn't invent decluttering. They repackaged Stoic principles for the digital age. When a minimalist chooses a capsule wardrobe, they're not rejecting fashion, they're asserting that decision fatigue steals more joy than variety adds. When they opt for a tiny house, they're not punishing themselves, they're trading square footage for financial freedom and time. These aren't sacrifices, they're strategic trade-offs that echo Epictetus' teaching. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Here's where it gets personal. What does enough look like in your life? Not the number your bank app displays, but the moment when you could pause the striving and say, "This sustains me." For some, it's a paid-off mortgage. For others, it's knowing they can cover 6 months of expenses if the job disappears. The Stoics wouldn't prescribe an amount. They'd challenge you to define the line where your possessions stop serving you and start owning you. Because true wealth isn't about the digits in an account. It's about the space between what you have and what you desire. The narrower that gap, the richer you become. So consider this: if you lost every non-essential possession tomorrow, what would you genuinely miss? Not the items society trained you to value, but the few that spark real meaning: your grandmother's recipes, the hiking boots that carried you up mountains, the notebook where you scribble ideas. That shortlist reveals more about your Stoic wealth than any financial statement ever could. As Seneca reminded us, until we have begun to go without, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are. The road to abundance isn't paved with more, it's cleared by realizing how little you actually need. Epictetus cut straight to the bone when he said, "Tell me who you spend time with, and I'll tell you who you are." The Stoics didn't just see friendship as casual companionship, they viewed it as the invisible architecture of character. In an age where social media metrics equate popularity with value, and loneliness has become a silent epidemic, this ancient wisdom feels painfully urgent. The average person today has hundreds of digital connections but fewer confidants than any generation before. The Stoic alternative: cultivate what they called virtue circles, small, intentional groups where every interaction polishes your ethics like stones tumbling together, smoothing each other's rough edges through honest dialogue and shared growth. Consider 2 dinner parties. One fills a mansion with acquaintances exchanging pleasantries, business cards, and surface-level banter. The other gathers 5 people in a modest living room debating life's hardest questions, calling out each other's blind spots, and leaving fortified with courage for the week ahead. The first might pad your contact list, the second shapes your soul. Marcus Aurelius cherished such rare bonds, writing, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love, and to do so alongside those who elevate your being." That last clause wasn't an afterthought, it was the linchpin. Modern science confirms what the Stoics practiced. Harvard's 85-year study on happiness found that quality relationships are the single strongest predictor of life satisfaction, more than wealth, fame, or even health. Yet we've normalized friendships built on convenience rather than conviction, mistaking constant connectivity for genuine connection. The Stoics would challenge us to audit our inner circles with the same rigor we apply to financial investments. Seneca warned, "Associate with those who will improve you. Welcome those whom you can improve. The process is mutual." Here's how to build your own virtue circle. First, identify 3 people whose presence leaves you calmer, wiser, or more inspired. These aren't necessarily those you see most often, but those whose words linger in your mind like good poetry. Next, notice who drains your resolve. The chronic complainers, the integrity compromised, the energy vampires Epictetus urged us to avoid like infection. Finally, bridge the gap. Initiate conversations that go deeper than gossip. Ask about their moral dilemmas. Share your struggles with temperance. Trade book recommendations that stretch your thinking. Your challenge this week: host a Stoic salon, one intentional gathering where phones stay silenced and discussions explore what it means to live well. Not as a philosophical exercise, but as a lifeline, because in a world starving for depth, the rarest form of wealth isn't followers, it's friends who hold mirrors to your best self and refuse to let you settle for less. Seneca called anger brief insanity, a fire that burns the hand of whoever wields it. The Stoics didn't just warn against rage, they dissected it with the precision of surgeons. Imagine holding a red-hot coal with the intent to throw it. Who gets burned first? Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient insight. When anger flares, the amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex, the brain's rational command center, for 12 to 18 seconds. In that window, we're not decision makers, we're hostages to physiology. The Stoic antidote wasn't suppression, but ruthless awareness. They practiced spotting anger's first flickers, a clenched jaw, a rising pulse before the inferno could spread. Compare this to today's conflict resolution training. Elite mediators are taught to recognize trigger stacking, those tiny irritations that accumulate until one final straw unleashes disproportionate fury. Like Stoics, they intervene early. When tensions rise in high-stakes negotiations, the best mediators don't lecture about calm, they create deliberate pauses. A sip of water, a request to rephrase, these aren't stalling tactics. They're modern versions of Epictetus' advice to step outside yourself until the storm passes. Seneca's letters reveal a startlingly contemporary strategy. When you feel anger rising, walk, not as retreat but recalibration. He knew motion disrupts emotional feedback loops, a principle now backed by studies showing how walking reduces amygdala activity by 25%. Modern therapists call this state change. Stoics called it wisdom. Your challenge tomorrow: become an archaeologist of your own anger. Carry an imaginary notepad and excavate 3 moments when irritation stirs. Was it the 10th interruption from a coworker? The 3rd red light in a row? Notice how frustration builds like kindling, each tiny spark harmless alone but deadly gathered. Then apply the Stoic pause, 10 deep breaths before responding, not to deny the emotion, but to choose its expression. Because here's the secret the Stoics uncovered: anger is never about control. It's about the illusion of control lost. Master that distinction, and you master yourself. The idea that Stoics were cold or unfeeling is one of history's great misunderstandings. Far from advocating detachment from humanity, they practiced a radical form of compassion, one that wasn't driven by fleeting emotions, but by a deep commitment to acting for the greater good. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who spent his reign battling plagues and invasions, wrote, "What benefits the hive benefits the bee." This wasn't just poetic imagery. It was a call to see service not as optional charity, but as fundamental to human nature. The Stoics believed helping others wasn't about feeling pity. It was about recognizing our shared humanity and acting accordingly. Modern effective altruism echoes this ancient wisdom. Like the Stoics, today's most impactful philanthropists don't just follow their hearts, they use reason to identify where their efforts will do the most good. Take billionaire investor Ray Dalio, who applies Stoic principles to his giving. He doesn't scatter donations impulsively. He targets systemic issues like education reform and disaster resilience, treating philanthropy like an engineering problem. Or consider the founder of the Against Malaria Foundation, who distributes bed nets not based on emotional appeals, but on rigorous data about preventable deaths. This is Stoic compassion in action, clear-eyed, strategic, and relentless. But what about the rest of us without billion-dollar budgets? The Stoic approach starts with a simple shift, viewing service not as an extra task, but as part of daily life. Musonius Rufus taught that helping a neighbor repair their fence or mentoring a coworker was just as philosophically significant as grand gestures. The key was consistency over intensity, small acts done regularly, like drops filling a bucket. Modern research supports this. Studies show that people who volunteer just 2 hours a week experience greater life satisfaction than those who binge volunteer and burn out. Here's where Stoicism offers a crucial safeguard against compassion fatigue. The ancients knew that sustainable service requires boundaries. Epictetus warned, "If you try to carry everyone's burdens, you'll collapse and then be useless to all." Think of an emergency oxygen mask on a plane. You secure your own before assisting others. Stoic caregivers, from nurses to social workers, embody this by prioritizing their mental reserves. They understand that rest isn't selfish, it's what keeps their compassion operational. So how can you apply this? Start with your circle of influence. Maybe it's tutoring a student in your field, or using your professional skills for a nonprofit pro bono. The Stoics would urge you to ask not just who needs help, but where can I add unique value? And when fatigue whispers that you've done enough, remember Marcus Aurelius's reminder: to stop helping others is to stop being human. The goal isn't martyrdom, it's building a life where service isn't an exception but the rule. One of the most overlooked tools in the Stoic toolkit isn't solemnity, it's laughter. While modern outrage culture trains us to react to every minor slight as if it's a 5-alarm fire, the Stoics wielded humor like a scalpel, cutting through life's absurdities with sharp perspective. Epictetus, the philosopher who endured slavery and exile, offered a masterclass in not taking things personally. If someone told you that a certain person spoke ill of you, don't bother with excuses or defenses, just reply, "Obviously, he didn't know my other faults, or else he wouldn't have mentioned only these." That's not just wit, it's psychological judo, flipping insults into opportunity. For humility and even amusement, consider how today's comedians employ Stoic detachment without realizing it. When a heckler shouts at a stand-up performer, the best don't crumble or rage, they pivot. They might mock their own awkwardness, exaggerate the insult to absurdity, or simply shrug it off like water on a duck's back. This isn't just crowd control, it's practical philosophy in action. Comedians like George Carlin and Tig Notaro don't just joke about life's hardships, they reframe them, transforming personal pain into collective catharsis. The Stoics would recognize their technique instantly. By stepping outside themselves, they turn wounds into wisdom and frustration into fuel for connection. Now apply this to your own life. Think of a recent annoyance, maybe a passive-aggressive email, a delayed flight, or a spilled coffee. How might a Stoic comedian narrate this scene? Imagine exaggerating it to ridiculous extremes, the email as an epic Shakespearean betrayal, the flight delay as a survival saga, the coffee spill as a tragic opera. Suddenly, what felt like a crisis becomes material for your internal stand-up special. This shift doesn't trivialize your experience, it puts it in perspective. Modern outrage thrives on amplifying grievances, while Stoic humor deflates them with a well-timed punchline, not to dismiss real pain, but to disarm the trivial. The key lies in distinguishing between what deserves gravity and what deserves a grin. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he wasn't advocating indifference. He was handing you a remote control to adjust the volume of your reactions. So next time life hands you a script full of minor tragedies, ask yourself, could this be a comedy instead? Sometimes the most philosophical response isn't a stern meditation, it's a well-timed eye roll and a muttered, "Of course this would happen." Because resilience isn't just about weathering storms, it's about learning to dance in the rain, even if your moves are awkward and the rhythm's all wrong. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." That single line captures the essence of Stoicism's enduring power. It wasn't designed as an academic debate, but as a practical toolkit for living with unshakable clarity across centuries. Consider this, the same principles that steadied a Roman emperor during plague and war now guide Navy SEAL through hellish training, help CEOs navigate market crashes, and empower ordinary people to face personal tragedies with extraordinary resilience. The Stoic legacy isn't locked in parchment. It pulses through modern psychology labs, therapist offices, and even Silicon Valley boardrooms where leaders dissect Epictetus alongside quarterly reports. Modern research continues to validate what these ancient thinkers knew instinctively. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, the gold standard for treating anxiety and depression, directly borrows from Stoic exercises, teaching patients to separate events from their interpretations, just as Epictetus taught his students. Studies on emotional regulation show that the Stoic practice of cognitive distancing, viewing thoughts as passing clouds rather than absolute truths, reduces stress reactivity by nearly 40%. Even the military's resilience training programs echo Marcus Aurelius' nightly journaling ritual, incorporating structured reflection to harden mental toughness. The Stoics weren't just ahead of their time, they mapped the timeless architecture of human fortitude. Yet what makes Stoicism truly universal isn't just its effectiveness, it's its adaptability. A single mother in Nairobi and a tech founder in San Francisco might apply the same Stoic principle differently. One uses the dichotomy of control to endure daily hardships without crumbling. The other employs Premeditatio Malorum to stress-test business plans against potential disasters. The philosophy molds itself to the shape of human need, whether that's surviving oppression or thriving in abundance. This fluidity explains why Stoicism resurges during upheavals, from wars to pandemics, offering not rigid answers, but a compass for navigating uncertainty. So here's the question only you can answer: which Stoic principle hums with resonance in your life right now? Is it the liberating focus on what you can control when the world feels chaotic? the transformative reframing of obstacles as opportunities, or perhaps the quiet power of pausing before reacting, that sacred space between stimulus and response where freedom lives. The beauty of this ancient system is that it meets you where you are. You don't inherit wisdom, you earn it through practice, one deliberate choice at a time. Because the ultimate Stoic legacy isn't in the scrolls or the quotes, it's in the living proof that minds trained in these principles don't just survive storms, they learn to sail in any wind. Inner fortitude isn't some mystical gift bestowed on a lucky few. It's a muscle carved through deliberate repetition, like a blacksmith shaping iron with each strike of the hammer. Every obstacle you've faced, every moment you've steadied your breath when chaos swirled, has been a rep in this invisible gym. The Stoics didn't just believe this, they built systems to prove it. Take the dichotomy of control, that razor-sharp tool for sorting life into what's yours to command and what isn't. It's not passive surrender, it's strategic focus, like a chess master conserving energy for moves that actually matter. Or negative visualization, where rehearsing worst-case scenarios strips them of their terror. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation. The Stoics called it wisdom. These aren't abstract theories, they're drills as practical as a fire escape plan, ensuring you won't freeze when the heat rises. Seneca, who endured exile, chronic illness, and betrayal, wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." That's the heart of it. Hardship doesn't build character. It reveals it, then hones what it finds. Think of a diamond tested under pressure. The flaws were always there, but the crush of circumstance shows where to polish. Your resilience isn't fixed. It's forged in the daily choice to meet frustration with curiosity, fear with preparation, and chaos with that quiet question: what part of this is mine to hold? Here's where philosophy becomes action. Don't try to swallow Stoicism whole. Start with one exercise. Maybe it's the morning ritual of asking, what could go wrong today? And mentally bracing for it. Or perhaps it's the evening audit, dissecting where you stumbled and where you stood firm. Even something as simple pausing before reacting, counting to 5 when irritation flares, can be your first rep in the gym of the mind. Progress won't come in straight lines. Some days you'll wield these tools like a master. Others you'll fumble. That's not failure, it's the process. So take this not as an ending, but an invitation. The Stoics left doors open, not closed. Their words aren't relics, but roadmaps. If this resonated with you, there's more where it came from. Hit subscribe and let's keep unpacking these ancient strategies for modern storms, because the world needs more unshakable minds, and yours could be next.